Are you or someone you know looking to buy or sell a home? When you use a HomeGain Realtor to buy or sell a home, you can get $150. Visit HomeGain.com and click on the Promo 150 banner at the top of the page to get started. Compare HomeGain Realtors and choose your favorite. Complete your home purchase or sale transaction with a HomeGain Realtor, and HomeGain will pay you $150. Get started today by going to HomeGain.com. Welcome back, Washington, D.C. Metro, to Real Estate 360 Live. I'm your host, Ryan Sloper, joined today by my guest, Louis Cammarosano, the general manager of HomeGain. Quick reminder, Real Estate 360 is designed to build the Washington, D.C. Metro's housing and credit markets one house at a time. If you have any questions, whether it's credit-related, whether you're trying to obtain a home loan, whether you're trying to buy, whether you're trying to short sell a property or trying to get a modification worked out with your bank, I would be glad to be of assistance to you. And if I can't help you, I'll put you or point you in the right direction to a person that can. The phone number is 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030. Or you can reach out via the web at realestate360live.com. That's realestate360live.com. There's a button on the side that says ask a question. Feel free to click that, and I will get back to you by the end of the day. So I just wanted to wrap up this week's market movers, so just let you know what's on deck this week that could affect interest rates. And really, there's not that much. Economic data is rather sparse this week. Most of the attention will be on how equity markets perform and the demand for U.S. Treasuries at the auctions. The Treasury will auction out about $72 billion of notes and bonds beginning Tuesday through Thursday. So that's really about it. Only other thing, we need to really keep our, keep the pulse of the markets as far as what's going on in Greece. Because depending upon what goes on there, we might see, more of a flight to safety, which we've already seen, and more money going into treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, which would help interest rates go lower. So that is a possibility. So we'll keep you posted on that. But as of right now, it looks like, for the week, interest rates should probably remain steady at the levels that they're at. So if you do have a transaction that you're trying to figure out whether you should lock or float, it's probably a good bet that things are going to stay relatively the same all week. Now, I want to jump into, I've seen estimates stating that 29% of deals that are going into a contract and requiring a mortgage don't even close. And that number completely just, blows my mind, because it means that, after a buyer and seller are coming into terms on a sale, that almost 3 out of 10 transactions are falling apart. Now, I know a lot of you are probably wondering, now, why are these deals falling apart? And, there's a couple of different things that can come up in real estate transactions that would really cause them to fall apart. The first one being appraisal issues. Now, in many markets, we're seeing a lot of values that are still declining. So when appraisers are often finding themselves in a difficult position where with so many transactions, including where sellers are having to give a lot of concessions towards buyers' closing costs, that the values aren't always coming in at the listed sales price. So, Louis, just generally speaking, like if somebody were to put an offer on a property for $250,000 and they're getting 3% seller concessions for their closing costs, appraiser goes out and says, well, I really don't see $250, I see $240. Well, at that point in time, the seller has the option to either lower the price to the appraised value of the $240, or the buyer can walk away. And most of the time, if the seller chooses not to lower the price, then the buyer just will walk away. So that's one of the big reasons why deals fall apart, is that the appraisals are issues and they're not hitting the target values. And I think, there was so much stuff going on over the last couple of years where appraisers were feeling like they were being pressured into hitting certain values, that now they've taken the ultra conservative approach. Right. You know what I mean? To try and keep themselves out of murky waters and worried about somebody coming down and taking their license, that they're not willing to put their neck on the line as much as they used to.
Right, and think about sellers who still emotionally haven't gotten over the fact that their home has declined in value and they could have sold it a few years ago.
Yep.
More money, and now they're thinking they're going to get $250,000, and they say no, it's $240, and they probably should sell at $240 if they need to sell, but they probably just grumble to themselves that the appraiser is messed up. Maybe they try to get another appraisal, and then the deal doesn't happen.
Yeah, and one of the other...
It ends up being an emotional decision rather than an economic one. They just can't accept that their home price has gone down, and they're going to have to take it down another notch in order to sell it.
Yeah, and then the other thing with the appraisals too is that, like, let's say that their neighborhood was predominantly short sales and foreclosures. If they're just a regular sale, well, typically what the appraisers are supposed to do is find like sales, so other normal sales in their neighborhood. But what happens if there really aren't any? Is that they have to start to pull those foreclosures and short sale comparables into their report. Well,
that's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing about the seller is, remember, the HomeGain survey shows there's a big disconnect between what the seller thinks their home is worth, then what the realtor thinks the home is worth, and then it goes further down to what they actually listed for, and then for what it actually sells for. So this is probably the fifth time that the seller has been talked down from what they thought it was, and what the realtor thought it was, what they ended up listing it for, what they thought they sold it for. Now they're telling them it's all the way down to $240. That's when they throw the towel in. So it's not just the last shock. That's the last shock. It's not the first one, and that's the shock that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of the time, with the age of the internet, and most people, sellers are probably starting their initial search on the internet to try to get a ballpark feel for what things are selling for in their neighborhood. Over first glance, they probably are always going to come up with a number higher than what realistically that house is going to sell for. And
then the realtor tells them something different.
Yep.
Then they list the house for something different. The offers don't come in at that price.
Yep.
And they're working down the ladder.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden the appraisal comes in and it's another $10,000 less. At that point, it's just like, well, we're not going to sell our home. We're just going to stay here.
Right.
And that happens in a lot of situations. And and at that point, like I said, I think you got to remove emotion from these transactions a lot of the time, and just because on the flip side,
it's hard to do though, Ryan. It's most people, their only large asset.
I know. But, I always try to tell people that, look, okay, I understand you're not necessarily netting, or you're netting $5,000 less than what you thought, or 10,000, 20, whatever it is. But you have to look at the opportunity on the other side, which is if they're buying, and moving up to a bigger home, yeah, they might not have as much of a down payment to put down on the other one, but they're going to be locking in at new all-time low interest rates. So they might have been at 5% on their current mortgage, which they weren't able to refinance for whatever reason. And now they're out of that situation if they can sell or even break even and move into another home at interest rates, 4% or below, depending upon their qualifications. It's an all-out, win-win situation if you look at it from that perspective.
If you do look at it from that perspective, but if they look at it from the perspective that they thought their home was worth $300, the realtor tells it it's worth $270. They list it for $250. The appraisal comes in at $240. It's very hard to get them out of that mindset.
Yeah.
They think they're out $50,000.
Yeah, and I think the important part is, making sure that you're working with a professional that knows your area right up front, that can give you, a good estimate of what your house, or range of what your home should likely sell for. Because a lot of these appraisal issues can be taken care of. If they're working with an agent that really knows the market, really has the comparables laid out, they can, literally meet the appraiser at the house, making sure he's licensed and is familiar with the area that he's, doing the report in. Because that's another reason why appraisals don't come in too, is you have, for instance, a property that's located in Virginia, but the appraiser is licensed in Maryland. He's coming across the state. He really doesn't have a clue what's going on in Virginia.
That's true, but unfortunately, a lot of consumers and home sellers end up with the wrong realtor, and the way they end up with the wrong realtor is, in order to get the listing, the realtor will tell them, sure, I can get you $300.
Yep.
Then they get the listing contract, and then they end up not closing the deal and wasting that home seller's time. Whereas if they got the right real estate agent, the right realtor, who would know all the things and would be able to make the arguments that you're making, assess the right price to sell at, and only work with the home seller if they were listening to them, because the real estate agent is a local professional and does know what homes go for and what they realistically can get, and can work out appraisal issues in advance. So really, when it's a surprise like this at the end, that's because perhaps the real estate agent hasn't done their job.
Yeah, and and you don't want to be working with somebody that's just going to tell you what you want to hear.
You're not going to hear what you want to hear now, because what you want to hear is that your home is worth 20% more than it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're looking for someone to work with, call the number. It's 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030, and I'll gladly put you in touch with an agent that knows your area.
Dose of reality is what is required in today's economics.
Yeah, and also if you want to search for agents, they can also do that at HomeGain, correct, Lewis?
Sure. At HomeGain, we have a service which allows you to compare real estate agents. You can compare their commissions, their qualifications, do it all anonymously. You go to homegain.com, you pick the far left box, which helps you select the real estate agent. You fill out a short profile of what you're looking for in a real estate agent. You let them propose to you, and then you pick the right one.
Yeah, and then
That's what you have to do. You don't just. There's a statistic that shows that 72% of home buyers and sellers pick the first real estate agent that they meet. Now, that can't be right. You don't marry the first woman you meet. It just doesn't make any sense when you're in a transaction that's going to involve hundreds of thousands of dollars not to shop around. You can do that at homegain.com.
Oh yeah, perfect. I highly recommend that, if you're doing that and starting your search, go there because you can get a lot of information and let you after you get all the information, make an informed decision on who you want to work with. The second other reason why deals are dying or real estate deals are failing is because short sales are not being approved by the current lender. This is a pretty obvious one because a lot of people get into the short sale transaction and they know that, yeah, they have an agreement between the seller and the buyer, but the third party, who is now the bank, has to agree to those terms.
Not the seller's home anymore at that point almost.
Correct. It's almost like, the seller is technically, they're on title, they're on the title, but really the overall decision is really being made by the bank. So the seller doesn't have any control over it. And really it's sealing the fate of the seller as to, whether maybe they're going to have a deficiency judgment. And so these things can fall apart all the time. What we've seen is that the short sales are getting better, but a lot of times the contract price is one thing and what the bank agrees to is completely something different. So if the bank comes back and raises the sales price up $20,000, or if they come back and say, no, we're not going to pay any closing costs, that's a deal breaker.
Right, and the bank must have some models that show that if they were to take too many short sales at too much of a discount, they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. And in DC Metro, yeah, in the DC Metro area, it's interesting because even the foreclosures and short sales aren't selling at that steep of a discount compared to the rest of the country. I mean, they're really closer to fair market value than a lot of places try to say that they sell for 50% off and stuff like that. Maybe in Florida, Nevada, Arizona, and areas like that, but that's not the case here in DC Metro. I mean, really, you're getting multiple contract situations on a lot of these homes that are priced low like that and really bidding them back up. So that's the second one. The third one is bad pre-approvals from a loan officer. Lewis, I mean, really, like this, it seems like common sense, but a lot of loan officers just throw out approval letters saying that the person's qualified up to $300,000, and they have never even seen a person's actual tax returns. Well, I would think that might be an issue because guess what happens when the underwriter gets it and says, oh, well, you didn't, your bottom line is really not 100, it's 25,000. It seems like common sense, but a lot of time I think people are just giving their information over the phone. Documentation is actually not being received until after the contract has been consummated. So they're,
it's a way of getting the business. They figure in many cases it'll work out.
Yep.
In other cases it won't, but they'll play the percentages.
Yeah. So, and I tell consumers, you should actually, if your loan officer is not asking for you stuff up front, you should be worried. You should actually take a proactive stance and say, hey, I want to get you my tax returns, my W-2s, my bank statements, my pay stubs, everything. So you have it. And I know that my loan is going to be pretty much golden other than, the off chance that I lose my job. When we come back, we're going to give you the last reason why deals are falling apart. And also we're going to get in the credit fix segment. Ronnie Lambeth will be going over how bankruptcies can affect your credit when we come back. Stay tuned.